Yes, Jeshua. So I understand that you are studying. You have already started this company for the last like how many years? 5 years, right? Crossroads Myanmar.
Crossworks, yes, correct.
Yeah, and also you are also a VC, an investor as well, angel investor, right? So you also work for a
Angel
VC.
investor,
So
yeah. I
yeah,
used
so
to work for a VC, but I no longer work for one.
I see. So right now you are becoming an angel investor. So pretty much you are really very sort of you're considered part of the startup ecosystem, right, in South Asia because you happen to travel around a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, you are an expert in also like sort of finding the right tickets, right? Sort of looking for the best price trip and other things, I guess. So at this time around, I'm inviting you to really talk about the Star Weekend inspiration, which is a way for us to really sort of interview the people in the real sort of industry, so
Mm-hmm.
that all the participants who are going to be in the program is getting inspired through this video series. So today I'm going to ask you a few questions about your
Sure.
sort of background and everything. So the first question is this. So of course, we all know that you are the founder of Crossworks, and you're
Mm-hmm.
pretty much famous in the LinkedIn as well. But would you mind sort of telling us a bit more about you? So what are the things that you want to highlight about yourself?
Sure. Happy to give some background. I'm obviously a yeah, I think it's very easy to look at people and just look at their title, right? And what does someone do? What's their job title, CEO or founder or CTO. But essentially we are all human, right? And I think I like to believe that I myself am also a human, fellow human being from planet Earth, and we have more in common or in similarity than difference. And personally, I started off this journey as a filmmaker, right? My first career was in media industry and started really early because I get interest in media from the age of about 9. I started working around 15 and then did freelance jobs until I was 19. After that, I started my first company as a peer-to-peer rental platform, almost by accident, because I was just solving my own problems. And that sort of led me to want to learn more about business, right? Because I had no background in business, I didn't go to university, and I was thinking of how can I learn more about this area called, business, because I had accidentally started a company. So instead of working for the big organizations that I would used to do under a freelance model previously, I started my second company called Startup Media. And that was a deliberate attempt to start working with more small companies. Because I also learned at that time that, the big companies, they like to talk a lot about innovation. Every time the CEO will come up and say, we are on the cutting edge of technology, we are doing something breakthrough. But if you play last year's video and you just rename it to 2023 or 2024 next year, there's not much difference actually. So they're saying the same thing, but they're doing the same thing. Whereas usually at that time, I didn't know what's a startup, right? I didn't have any idea about the tech ecosystem, about what the VCs do, about fundraising or anything like that. But I just had a feeling inside that, small companies typically will be more innovative. You spend less time working on, all the red tape and stuff like that. So I started that company, Startup Media, almost again by accident and a way to solve my own problem of, dealing with less bureaucracy and starting to learn a bit more about how to run a business. And almost by accident, because of the name, perhaps, some of the accelerator programs, the incubators, they started asking me that, hey, you are called Startup Media. That means that you work with startups, right? And of course, as a new company that doesn't have much funding, every customer is good. So I would say, yeah, sure, I work with startups. And I'll get invited to a lot of these accelerators, demo days, hackathons. And most of these companies there would be paying, in terms of program fees or equity to go through these types of programs. Whereas I was being paid as a vendor to cover them for videos, for photos, for marketing purposes, to create videos about the companies as they were pitching, trying to raise funds, helping them with their marketing angles. So that sort of was my first exposure into the startup ecosystem. And yeah, I slowly obviously learned more about what is a startup, how does some of this fundraising thing work. And along the way, I was also sort of needing to hire people, right? So as the two companies I had grew, the peer-to-peer rental platform and the like marketing outfit, right, startup media, I needed to onboard more and more people into the team. And initially I would go for, freelancers. I started hiring people even in Singapore. But I realized that, small companies like ourselves, we always struggle to hire like really good talent in Singapore, because Singapore is a small country, unlike Myanmar, and unemployment rate is always like less than 3%. So those people who are coming out of school, even those with 1 or 2 years experience, their dream job is to work for Google or Facebook, right? Or maybe they want to work in the government because they think it's a very stable, career. You cannot get fired even in a recession. You have a job. So the small and medium companies, or even the startups, like not well-funded startups, not well heard of startups, usually are at the end of the line when it comes to talent. And for freelancers, they don't stick around, right? They are freelancers, so they look for any opportunity that comes their way. And that sort of led me to looking at offshore full-time hires, right? And that's how I ended up in Myanmar, actually. So the backstory is a bit longer than that, but I guess I would summarize it that, by that time I had already been to Myanmar about 3 or 4 times. I had seen the progress and transition from 2013, my first time there, to 2018. And I had confidence that, there would be some people that will be able to assist me with some of the functions like digital marketing, like development, like admin or video editing, which I needed to hire for at that time. So I started a small office, just hire a bunch of people. And that's kind of also how I got into the whole remote hiring thing by accident, because it was just meant to solve my own problem once again, right? And then along the way, as time would have it, people would say that, hey, I know that you are hiring someone in Myanmar, right? You have some team members there. We are also interested because we also cannot find the talent that we need in Singapore. And a lot of that was also like my first company, right? Because we were a platform company. So we had a lot of companies that were using the platform, which were part of the platform. And they reached out and asked, can I hire someone in Myanmar, and maybe you help us take care of all the admin stuff, all the HR aspects, and we just focus on the work aspect. So yeah, I started doing that. And then after a while, we realized that, there is a market for this. We got selected for Echelon's top 100 program, went up to share about, the remote talent landscape. And this was all pre-COVID, right? So remote working was not super like in fashion yet, right? It was kind of very nascent. We were having to explain to people what is a Dropbox, what is a Slack, what is a Zoom or Google Meet. Yeah, but along the way, I also realized that, there was a huge issue of people not knowing about like where even is Myanmar, or what kind of like opportunities lie ahead for them. So when people don't know something, they are very fearful, and they just think that, there could be danger, there could be some risk ahead. And the headlines of the news were not very helpful either. So with the skill set of like media that I had, I decided to start creating a bit of awareness on that. That's also how I started Here Myanmar, which was a channel on Facebook that was creating short videos about like culture, about lifestyle, about the situation in all the states and regions of Myanmar. And so I had the opportunity to travel up and down the length and breadth of the country. And we made about 125 videos, got a couple of million views. The idea for that company was to, create a digital marketing model where we would rely on sponsorships for making the channel self-sustaining. But unfortunately, COVID happened, and most of the F&B, the tourism type of companies that we would have worked with as sponsors, they obviously did not do that well. And we were limited in the traveling aspect as well when COVID happened. So we had to put that on an indefinite pause. And COVID also sort of saw me being unable to come back to Myanmar physically, right? So I was effectively stuck outside. And while I was trying to make my way back, I went to Africa on a one-way ticket from Singapore. And, COVID never seemed to end. It was meant to be a 2 or 3 month trip, but there were so many variants, and that 3 months became almost 3 years. where I hopped around about 55 countries. And by the time I had reached Egypt, right, where I wanted to go to the embassy in Cairo to pick up a visa to go back to Myanmar, there was a coup, right? So in February of 2021, that was when I was in Egypt. And coincidentally, that was also when one of my former clients actually introduced me to my previous employer, which was the VC fund. And we started talking. We didn't have any sort of serious ideas of working together until a couple of months later. And I joined them remotely from Bangladesh. I still remember sometime in May. That was May 2021, right? So started working with this VC fund remotely, all while I gave the local team back in Myanmar a few options, right? Like, because obviously they had to run with the ball. I couldn't be there to run things, and there wasn't even a way for me to get a visa, right? So I told them, like, okay, guys, we can do option A, which is to wind down slowly, right? We can do a status quo, right, where we just try and maintain everything and see how long this goes for. Or option C, where let's see whether we can double down and use this as an opportune moment to help people to get these remote job opportunities amidst the disruption. And I'm quite happy that the team chose option C, right? And in my absence, they actually grew the team from about 20 people at the start of last year to today we have about 95 remote workers working remotely for about 40 companies. So a lot of the credit is actually not mine. I think we have a lot of credit that goes to the team that decided to choose the difficult path, right? It's not just about the founder. Sometimes I think the founder's job is also to hire people who is better than him. So yeah, in that journey, I sort of hopped around the world. Eventually managed to come back to Myanmar sometime last year in June. Stayed for 2 months. Hired a bunch of new people as we were growing. We moved into our office again because during COVID we had to sort of terminate the lease for a year or so and make everyone fully remote. But that also turned out to be another blessing in disguise, because previously we were only looking at people who were able to work remotely from Yangon, and they had to come to our office from Monday to Friday. But after COVID happened, we were able to attract talent from all over Myanmar, right? So some people coming from Sipor or from Taunji or from Sitwe, Mandalay, Mogok even. And that sort of really expanded the horizons for the company almost by accident. And yeah, I think after fast forward to this year June, right, when I left the VC fund, and I've started looking at different challenges that people are facing. I think the journey now is really a lot more about how we can create that environment around this that community around these people that we already have under the Crossworks wing, and make that a conducive environment for people to grow, for people to support each other. And yeah, I think that's pretty much a very convoluted story of what has happened so far. Tried to be as brief as possible, but it's never a short and easy story with startups.